Thanks for joining us today. We would love to hear how God is using this ministry in your life. So please take a minute and send us your story at amen@clantonnewlife.com. And if God has used this ministry to touch your life in any way, we want to encourage you to partner with us financially and help us to continue delivering God's Word to the world. You can visit clantonnewlife.com/give and select the giving option that works best for you. Thanks again for joining us and enjoy today's message.
Well, it's so good to have all of you here. I want to welcome you again if this is your very first time, or if you've been here a million times before. Hey, we're just glad you're here today. Amen? Amen. Turn to somebody next to you and tell them you're glad to see them in church today. Now turn to your second choice and say, it's cool that you're here too. I'm glad about that first one, but the second one, hey, it's cool, they showed up too. I'm all right with things sitting here. We're so excited to be here and continuing on with the series that we started last week, talking about love. We're calling the series "The Color of Love." Again, we're not talking necessarily specifically about colors, but we're talking about the look of love. What does love look like throughout Scripture? We see the greatness of our incredible God's love displayed all throughout history and throughout time and throughout the pages of Scripture, and we're taking a look at this in this series and taking a look at what is the color of love, what is the look of love. And last week we talked about that God's love is bigger than our shame. Amen? Amen. Amen. And really what we did was we looked at that was we looked at a stark contrast between the shame and the guilt that the enemy tries to use to get us to run and to hide because of the sins and the mistakes of our past and all the things that we've done wrong, but how, by contrast, God, in His love, desires to free us from that shame and to bring us out of the shadows and out of the hiding and back into the place of restored relationship with Himself. And so He pursues us in this place of hiding that we oftentimes find ourselves in. He comes out looking for us, and he speaks words to us, often through other people, often through other Christian brothers and sisters. And He says, "Why are you hiding? Where are you at? What's going on in your life? What's causing you to shrink back into the shadows and to hide? What's happening?" See, because we all have a past, don't we? I do. I mean, we all have a past. We all have things that the enemy would try to get us to fall back into shame and to be controlled by. But see, when we come to Jesus and we get covered by the blood that God shed because of His great love for us, all of a sudden, instead of being controlled by that past and the shame that the enemy tries to heap on us, we begin to live in freedom. And that's a whole different world, isn't it? I know freedom is better than slavery. That's not rocket science. I'm not trying to heave any new information on you. It's just a better scenario, okay? And God brings us into this place of freedom where we can leave behind the fakeness and the false coverings that we create and the shame that the enemy tries to heap on us. And we begin to walk in this freedom and this openness with God. In fact, we go from living in a place of these coverings that we try to create for ourselves. We talked about the fig leaves last week, and we begin to be covered by what God covers us with. The Bible says that He clothes us in righteousness. He clothes us in His righteousness. And so we go from this messed up version of covering ourselves to being completely covered in His righteousness. So this morning we're gonna continue on with talking about these pictures of God's love, and we're gonna talk about the pictures that God shows us throughout the Bible. If you have a Bible with you this morning, go ahead and get it out, open it up. If you have an electronic device with a Bible app on it, you get that out, we're going to go ahead and open up to the Old Testament book of Hosea. Now, I know Hosea is not a place that a lot of us spend a whole lot of time reading. In fact, I see a bunch of you looking at the front of your Bible and trying to find out where it is. That's okay. I told Scott this morning, I did something and he made me lose my place. As I was talking to Kevin, I said, now you made me lose my place. I had Hosea marked here. Now it's going to take me a while to find it again. It's just not a place where you find a lot of devotional reading from. You know, it's not like you open up your morning devotionals often and find a big section of reading out of the book of Hosea. But it's an interesting story, and it's a great picture of God's love. And it's one of these incredible trophies that we talked about of God's love put on display for us. And I want to take just a few minutes this morning and look at this. We don't have time to look at all of it, but we're going to look just a little bit at the beginning of the book of Hosea, and we're going to kind of skip through it a little bit so we can get a picture of this story and the color of love displayed here in the book of Hosea. We're going to start reading in Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. It says this: "The Lord gave this message to Hosea, son of Beeri, during the years," underline those words, during the years when Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah were kings of Judah, and Jeroboam, son of Joash, was king of Israel. Now we're going to pause right there for just a second for a bit of background, because on the surface, if we look at this, we just see a bunch of names, and it's kind of hard to pronounce names. And it's, what does all this mean? Why is it here? It's important for us to recognize why this is communicating, why this is actually written in Scripture. And this list of names that we see written here, what it's doing is giving us a timeline. It gives us a context of when did this happen? And historically, we can look and see when did this take place. This was during a time when, just to summarize it for you, all of this, if we look historically at the history of the people of God and the nation of Israel, this marks a very dark time in the history of the people of God. So it says that God gave this message to Hosea during a really bad time, is essentially what all of those names sums up to me. During these years, if you're a Hebrew and you look back at history and you remember, and that was a bad time back then. You know what I mean? How many of you know there's some leaders, even in our nation, we can look back and say that was not the best time. You know? And this is their story right here. They look back and say, this was not good. Okay? It was during this time. This was a time when the region has previously been just dominated by the Assyrians. Okay? Assyria, the capital of Assyria was Nineveh. Okay, many of you know of Nineveh from the story of Jonah. This is during a time when the Assyrians have dominated the region, and now the Assyrians have fallen under some somewhat weaker leadership structure. And as they've come into a weaker scenario, the surrounding nations that have been oppressed by the Assyrians during these past years are now beginning to grow and flourish. They've been under the thumb of the strong Assyrians for years, but now the Assyrians are getting weaker, and so all these other nations are beginning to get stronger. Among those are the people of God, which at this time are divided into two nations. You've got Israel, 10 tribes of Israel in the north, and 2 tribes of Judah in the south. So you have 2 kingdoms, which represent the people of God, and they're, during this time, getting stronger. They're growing militarily. They're growing financially. A lot of prosperity is happening during this time. But during this financial abundance, there is a time of spiritual depravity. How many of y'all know that getting everything you want isn't always the best scenario? I mean, y'all ever seen kids that have never been told no? Well, they're well behaved, aren't they? This is the scenario for Israel at this time. They've got everything they want. They win every battle. They've got crazy financial affluence. Money is everywhere. The nation is just flourishing. But on the flip side of that, while they're flourishing financially, they're spiritually falling into decline. And they're falling further and further away from God. And this depravity that's reaching into the nation, it goes from the top to the bottom. It's from the priest to the people. It's everywhere. And instead of being a light to the nations around them like God has called them to be, the people of Israel are now just blending in with the world around them. They're blending in. They're doing all the same things that the heathen nations are doing. They're living lives just like the heathen nations. They look just like everybody else. There's no difference between them and the world. And so God speaks to this young man, Hosea, and he gives him a message for the people. And the whole book of Hosea is broken down into two sections. Essentially, you've got chapters 1 through 3, which talk about the events of Hosea's life. And then you've got chapters 4 through 14, which talk about the prophecies and give the actual words that Hosea gives as a prophetic message from God to the people. So we go on in verse 2. It says this: during this time, during these years, during these terrible years while the people are in decline, when the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, he said to him this: go and marry a prostitute, so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution. This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods. Can anybody agree with me that this seems like a strange passage of Scripture? I guess this right here is why we don't find a lot of devotional reading about Hosea. Just not going to find it. Here's your morning encouragement from Hosea. Just not there. You know, I grew up in kids' church reading about Elijah and Elisha and all these cool miracles that they did. You know, raising people from the dead and calling down fire from heaven, challenging the prophets of Baal, all this stuff. And I always thought, man, that's awesome. I'd love to be like an Old Testament prophet. Look at all the stuff they get to do. That's just incredible. You know, speaking and like axe heads float to the top of the water and all this stuff. And then one day I'm in school and I'm reading in the Old Testament. And I get to this book, Hosea, and I'm like, I haven't read that. I'm reading through Hosea, and I read like the first few chapters, and I'm like, no. I don't want to be like an Old Testament prophet anymore. That's cool. I'll pass, you know? I'll pass. But look at this. It says, go and marry a prostitute so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution. And this will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods. What God says is, I'm going to use your life, Hosea, as an illustration to all of these people of what it's like when they've turned away from me. When they've turned away from the one who created, who started, who initiated a covenant relationship. When they've turned away from that and gone to other gods. When they've turned away from the one who they're covenanted with and given their love to another. So this is what he tells Hosea to do. What happens? Verse 3. It says, so Hosea married Gomer. That's her wife. That's unfortunate right there. It is. He married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she became pregnant and gave Hosea a son. Now I want you to picture this for just a minute. The nation here is in a place of moral decline. And prostitution has become a common thing. And idol worship that involves immoral acts with prostitutes has become a societal norm here. And here's this young prophet, a man of God, seeking after God and listening to God's heart, going after God with all of his heart. A young man who's kept himself from the sins that others have made common. He's kept himself away from that stuff. And God comes to this young man and tells him, I want you to go after a sinful woman. I want you to pursue her, and I want you to enter into a covenant relationship with her. I want you to marry her. And sometimes here we are thousands of years later, and we breeze past this. You know, we read it, and it's like, wow, it's weird, and we keep moving. We kind of sterilize it and make it churchy, and we skip over what's being said here. But get this. This is a good guy. This is a pure young man. He's kept himself away from everything else that everyone else is doing. And God is asking him to knowingly pursue a woman who has not kept herself. Who has made a living out of selling herself to whoever's willing to pay. No moral standard, no purity. Hosea is giving up everything to knowingly marry a woman inevitably is far below the standard he would have set for himself, I'm guessing. You know, Robbie Scott is guys that done youth ministry. You pray with a lot of young people. You see a lot of young people praying for their neighbor. We teach them, pray for that person. I'm going to guess this is not what Hosea thought he was going to get when he prayed for his neighbor. I mean, let's think about this for a second. He's praying. He's praying for the right girl. And God says, the girl I have for you, it's no good. How's that for an answered prayer? I mean, let's think about this for a second. This is tough. This is tough. This is a really bizarre scenario and a hard thing for a young man who's seemingly done everything right. He's done everything right. He's pure. He has not made any mistakes. So Hosea, he obeys. He does what God asked him to do, and he goes and he marries the lady with the strange name. He marries Homer. Okay? And Gomer. Even worse. He marries Gomer. And she gives him a son. And God tells him, listen, God tells him, marry this. God tells him, how do you recover, right? God tells him, listen, marry this girl, she's going to give you a son. Then the son is born. And then God says, now, here's what you're going to name him. You're going to name him Jezreel. Okay? Now, on the surface, when Hosea hears this potentially could have seemed like good information. Okay? It could have seemed like good information coming to him because Jezreel is the name of a valley where during this time of prosperity, Israel has won battle after battle after battle. This has been a place where when they heard this name, they celebrated. This was a place where they demonstrated their military strength over and over. But after realizing what God's saying, this had to be a bit of a punch in the gut to Hosea because the name Jezreel actually means God scatters, which is what he had done in battle. But he tells Hosea to name his child God scatters because he's announcing, once again, using Hosea's life as a metaphor to the nation. He's announcing that he's about to bring terrible pain on the nation. And he's going to bring judgment. And the story goes on, and in fact, it plays out over several decades. And Hosea's wife becomes pregnant again, and the second time, she gives birth to a daughter. And this time the Lord comes to Hosea, it's in verse 6, and tells him, name the child Lo-Ruhamah, which means not pitied or not loved. Now, again, this story is riddled with people that have unfortunate names. Another one, because this means not loved. And this name of God, or this name that God gave to Hosea, and he wanted to name this child, it's just another part of the story continuing to use Hosea's life as a metaphor about God's relationship with his people. And you look at it and you say, "What? How is this a story of love, Chad? I'm missing it. I'm missing it." Because this name even means not loved. But you see, the not love that God is expressing through this child is not that he didn't love, but that she refused to be loved. That she refused to be loved. This wife refused to be loved. She refused to be the loved one of this patient God. Of this patient husband, of which the metaphor is showing God's love to the people. And God's saying, listen, my people, they refuse to be loved ones. They refuse to be the people that I've chosen them to be. They refuse to do what I've asked them to do. And so now at this point, here we are, not loved. Then the story goes on and it continues, and another child is born. And during this time, over the years of these children being born and the story carrying on, it all takes place in chapter 1 of Hosea. But it's actually during these years of this troubled marriage and these children being born into this marriage that Hosea is actually prophesying the messages that take place from chapters 4 through 14. And so this third child is born. In verse 8 it says this, after Gomer had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she again became pregnant and gave birth to a second son. And the Lord said, name him Lo-ammi, which means not my people. For Israel is not my people, and I am not their God. See, at this point, the story goes from insult to injury. And God has given Hosea the instructions, name the child Lo-ammi, which means not my people. And you see what's happening here is that all of these children are given these names which are significant in the nation, but they also have a significance in the life and the relationship of Hosea. And God is telling Hosea, listen, let's just call it what it is. Let's just call it what it is. You married this wife out of prostitution. She hasn't been faithful to you. Now this child, this third child, he's not even yours. He's not even yours. Let's just call it what it is. Just name that kid what he is. He's not yours. God, still using this life of Hosea as an illustration, says, listen, Israel is not my people. I am not their God. They've chosen other gods. They've given themselves to others. They've given themselves to others. Now, we might as well just call it what it is. Let's call a spade, Hosea. It is what it is, my friend. They are not my people, and that is not your son. What happened? Can you imagine this? Can you imagine this difficulty, the pain of this young man who's given his life to God? He's submitted himself. He's done everything right. He's never done it wrong. He's followed God. He's listened to God's word. He's shared God's words with the people. And what he gets in return for it is an unfaithful wife. An unfaithful bride, a series of children that are judgments, a kid that's not even his. He's got a broken marriage that he never contributed anything into breaking. Why? Why all the pain? Why all the difficulty? Why? What did this guy do wrong? What did he do wrong? I look at this and I'm like, what? What did he do? He's a prophet to the nation. He's bringing God's word. It seems like everything's right. Why is this even in Scripture? What is the point? I want to show you two thoughts this morning about the color of love that's displayed in the life of Hosea here. And the first one is this: that God's love does not condone continuing in sin. What's the point of this terrible situation that God asked Hosea to live through? Verse 2 tells us that Hosea's life and his marriage is to illustrate God's relationship with his people and what it's been like. And in that, Hosea gets this unique privilege, if you will. This unique privilege, this unique honor of experiencing the heart of God like no one in history ever has. God says, you want to know what it's like to be God? Let me show you something no one else has ever seen. Let me show you something no one else has ever seen. I want to let you have the privilege, Hosea, the privilege of experiencing what I experience, of feeling what I feel. I want you to enter into a covenant relationship with someone who refuses to be faithful. And so Hosea lives in this place of pain that comes from the unfaithfulness caused by his bride. You see, sometimes we, as the people of God, in covenant relationship with him, we get lulled, just like the people, just like the Israelites in this time of prosperity. We get lulled into these patterns of continued behavior. And just like Hosea's wife, it's oftentimes the things that we were a part of before we came to God. that we get drawn back into because it's common in the culture around us. It's common in the culture around us. And because we know that God is love, and we know that His love is so great for us, we're not concerned. We're not concerned. We don't concern ourselves with consequences because we know God's goodness. So we continue in this unfaithfulness, returning to the unfaithfulness. But do we see, church, do we see that every time we stray, every time we look more like the world around us than those who are in a committed relationship with the King, every time we look more like one than the other, do we see, do we realize, do we really understand how much we break His heart? Do we really see how much it breaks His heart? This is strong medicine this morning, church. I know that it is, but this is the whole reason this book exists. It's the whole reason God put Hosea through this and allowed him to see it. He said, look, you got to see what it's like. You got to see what it's like. You got to know that there's pain involved. Yes, when we run to other loves and we put other things of God above God, yes, His love remains. His love remains. But it doesn't make the pain any less for Him. It doesn't make the pain any less. It's the depth of His love. It's the strength of His love that causes Him to feel pain and to be wounded when we would rather gossip than speak life. It's the truth of His love. It's the strength. It's how much He loves us that causes Him to feel pain when we would rather chase after our addictions than chase after Him. It's the amount, it's the depth, it's the intensity of His love that causes Him to feel the pain.
What about me and Joseph?
When we would rather passionately pursue other things, hobbies, other things, and put those things above passionately pursuing Him. Why would He use the illustration of marriage? Because it's covenant. Because it's passion. Because when it's broken, it's painful. See, we've all heard the statement that you hurt the ones you love the most. I think the truth is that you hurt those who love you the most. See, it's the one who loves that feels the pain. It's the one who loves the greatest that hurts the worst. When we love deeply, we hurt deeply. It's the intensity of God's love for us that causes Him to hurt on our behalf when we go after other things. Any parent who's ever watched a child stray knows this. How much your heart hurts. How much you love. Your love's not going away. It doesn't stop. It's just the depth of that love that causes you to hurt when you see them run. When you see them pull away. When you see them stray and make the wrong decisions. This is the pain that our God experiences. He loves us too much. He loves us too much, church, to be okay with unfaithfulness. He loves us too much to be okay with unfaithfulness. He just can't be okay with it. It's too painful. But I want you to see this. The second thing about God's love, the color of God's love, I want you to see this morning is this. That God's love overcomes. God's love overcomes. Chapter 1 wraps up, and chapter 2 goes on with a whole long list, a whole chapter full of accusations against this unfaithful wife. And then chapter 3 comes, and it wraps up the whole thing about, the whole section about Hosea's life. And it says this, Hosea 3:1 says, "Then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again." He never stopped loving her, but in this language, basically what it means is to go and get her back. Because look what it says. Even though she commits adultery with another lover, this will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel, even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them. Look at this. After all of this unfaithfulness, Gomer is at a place where she just isn't sometimes unfaithful and just sometimes messing around on the side. At this point, she's gone full-blown back into a life of prostitution. She's full-blown back into a life of prostitution. How do we know this? If you read down through the rest of chapter 3, it says that Hosea went and he bought her out of her situation. He paid the price. He paid the price and he bought her out of this situation. And remember, God says, this is to illustrate my love for my people. Even though they have strayed, I will remain faithful. I will remain faithful. They haven't been faithful, but I have. I am. I stay faithful, even though they're not. Even though they're not. But when they're not, there's a price that has to be paid. The unfaithfulness, the running, the return, there's a price. There's a price to it all. And it says in Hosea 3:2, it says that Hosea paid 15 shekels of silver to get her back. I thought, well, that's an interesting number. Why? We do a little research on it and realize that during this time period, that was the price of buying a slave. And see, when we return to our sin, when we return, we subject ourselves to the being put back into the shackles that God's already freed us from. He already bought her out one time. He pursued her, got her out of prostitution. She returns to it. And now it's like a real life Bible human trafficking scenario. She's become a slave. And he has to pay a price to buy her out of this scenario. And he does it. He doesn't just pay that. He pays barley and he pays wine. He doesn't just pay the amount that's required. He pays that and then some. Why? Because of his love. Hosea paid this price. He paid the price to redeem her. To get her out of the slavery and to give her freedom once again. And see, just like Gomer, so many times we've failed, but see, God paid the price for our freedom. And just like Hosea, he didn't just pay the price required, he paid more than enough. 15 shekels was the price of a slave. He paid that and then some. And I want you to know that God paid the price and then some. He paid the price to free us, and he paid more than enough. More than enough to free us from our sin, to free us from our slavery, to free us from that which would try to entrap us into bondage. But see, what's key is that if you go down through here and you read through the rest of chapter 3, church, it says this, that Hosea redeems her. He brings her out of the slavery. He gets her out of that thing that she chose to return to. And then he says this, you must not return. You must not return. God's plan in saving us, church, in providing a way for each and every one of us, was so that we would live in freedom. Not so that we could get the marriage, but return to the slavery. His plan was never that we got the covenant relationship, but that we returned to the slavery. His plan was that we got the covenant relationship and then lived in the freedom. Come on, somebody. His plan is that we get the covenant relationship with him and then we live in the place of freedom. His love is so great, it overcomes. No matter what we've done, no matter what mistakes we've made, no matter what failures we've had, and no matter what we've returned to, it'll always be there. It'll always be more than enough. But church, here's the thing. Here's the thing we got to ask, is when we know how great his love is, and that how much pain it causes him when we fail, when we fall, and when we return to our ways, why would we ever want to do it? Why would we ever want to hurt the one who loves our soul so much? The one who paid the price of more than enough and shed his very own blood so that we could have freedom. Let's pray.